So as Canada is really, I think we're internationally known for our talent, but how do we continue to build that talent out so we're still the leading edge from now and into the future and future-proofing our economy? And I'd say from the Kingston economic development side, we're working alongside our partners with St. Lawrence College and Queen's University in building out a battery manufacturing micro-credential certification program. Bit of a mouthful. We probably need a better name. But we're really looking to invite industry partners to collaborate with us, academic partners to help deliver, because this is something that we see as being very relevant. And of course, with our recent regional announcements with Umicore, Li-Cycle, Cyclic Material, and all the other announcements across Ontario and Quebec, this is an exciting time. So we're really excited about this opportunity. And I think there's been a lot of analogies with pucks. So because it's February, and it's Canada, and it's cold, I'm gonna go straight to the quilt. Our initiative is one piece of that quilt. And all these great initiatives, and you're gonna hear about so many great things that are happening in the industry from our partners and in and around this room. And each piece of that quilt is so important as we stitch it together. And we're not just building a quilt, we're building like grandma's quilt that's going to last generations, that will match these generational investments that we're seeing across Canada right now. So with that, I'm so excited to be hosting this fabulous panel of really great experts across the industry. So I'm going to start off with, I'm going to pick on Simon. So Propulsion Quebec has done a ton of great work, especially really identifying what are these skills. And I know you've done work with task force and skill groups, and you have a lot of research. So I'm going to pass it over to you to talk about some of the work that you've done.
Yes, thank you, Shelley. And just for your understanding, Propulsion Québec is the cluster for electric and smart transportation of Quebec. We turned 5 years old this year, and honestly, it's been quite a ride to build an industry from scratch, if I may, because it's all new. So obviously, we have worked hard. We have a strategic plan, a roadmap to bring our industry to some sort of leadership in North America to 2030. And obviously bridging the talent gap is one of the key goal that we have. So we started a working group about like 3.5 years ago on skilled labor. And we started with a white page, I'll be honest with you. We didn't know anybody in the industry. And we didn't have a clue about like what the industry needed. And the big difference with Quebec and Ontario, I would say Ontario is a more probably the companies are bigger here. The automotive sector in Quebec, it was more like small, medium companies. So we had to build, and mobilize the whole industry around like what's their labor needs, what kind of skills has to be developed at an industry level. So we started modestly. And we quickly realized that there was a need to promote the industry to the general public to attract people and build a sustainable supply of skilled labor in our industry. So we decided to launch an initiative called En Route, the career hub in electric and smart transportation, in order to bring to the attention of the general public what it means to work in the electric and smart transportation. What kind of jobs, what are the companies, what sorts of training you can do to work in our industry. So it has become a promotional machine with content, dedicated website, yearly event, and events that we do at university and college, to really promote the sector and so on. And our goal is really to bring as much people as possible in this industry. So that's been new, but quite successful. And at the same time, we have to make sure that we upscale or reskill the labor. And we've been launching a project to do just that. We're starting with the electric transportation sector, which is the most mature in Quebec. But we also have to do this for smart mobility, the battery sector, and also the train and rail industry. So there's still a lot of work to be done. But I would say that in about 6 months from now, we'll have much better picture of the labor needs and skill set that's required for transport electrification in the province. We'll be willing to share that with the rest of Canada as well. And we hope that this is going to have an impact on new training, continuous training, and professional college and university training as well. So it's we're trying to do as fast as possible, but there's still a lot of work to do, I'll be honest with you.
Actually, I'm going to do a follow-up question, Simon. With the work that you've done with En route, are there certain skills that you've pulled out that really are being addressed with that program?
It's a good question. For now, I mean, the problem that we have is that our sector is quite wide, although it's called electric and smart transportation, but we cover many subsectors in this. And of course, there are some software skills that came up like as very important for the industry, some skills for engineers and technicians as well. But honestly, the work we are undertaking now will shed light on very specific competencies and skills that needs to be developed at scale, we hope, with training programs. So it will come very soon.
Well, I think we're all anxiously awaiting. So I'm going to turn my next question over to Ali. When we were talking before, the one thing we really discussed is that broad spectrum of the EV market. I know you noted 6 areas of interest. And I was wondering if you could touch on those 6 areas or 5 areas and maybe talk a little bit about the skills from maybe the McMaster perspective.
Sure. If you look at the transportation industry in general and automotive industry in specific, we are going through massive transitions. Electrification is one, connectivity is another one, autonomous capabilities a third one. So when you focus on the cars of the future, a lot of people today also, government and others, they talk about batteries. But battery pack is just one element of the new car. So actually the heart of the propulsion is the electric motor. So if you look at the current internal combustion engines and compare them with an electric, connected, autonomous, capable car, the electric motor is very different than an internal combustion engine. It needs a completely different sets of skills, and it's a massive, massive industry in itself. Automotive industry is realizing that now. Another area is power electronics. You need different high-power electronic and electrical systems because your battery is DC, you need to get to AC for the motors, and you need a DC to AC inverter. The electric power is AC, you need AC to DC rectifiers or fast chargers. These are power electronic converters. You need to have a bunch of DC-DC converters. So the new cars, they have a ton of power electronics. These are newest stuff for automotive industry at the scale that we are seeing. And then a ton of software, a lot more than what you need in an internal combustion engine, and a lot of ADAS, advanced autonomous capabilities, and advanced driver assistance systems and feature for the cars. So we need different sets of skills. And academia, universities, and there are industries who are actually good in those areas. Think about electric motors. There are 15 million motors manufactured a day worldwide. So auto industry OEMs, they think, okay, they can throw their weights around and they can push suppliers. Good luck doing that with electric motor companies. They are bigger entities. Same thing, power electronics. Majority of the advanced world, the energy and power, they go through some sorts of power electronics. So there is a ton of expertise, there is a ton of resources when it comes to training and talents, but they are in other fields. And the key thing is we need to be strategic. We need to be effective in taking advantage of talents in other fields in other industries, but also for the automotive and transportation industry.
Excellent. Well, thank you. There's a lot to think about. But with that, I actually would like to turn it over to Lauren. And one of the things that stood out to me from one of the morning sessions was that 3 million jobs are going to be disrupted in 10 years. That's massive. So from an industry representative and all your membership, I'm interested in what you're hearing from the industry members about the skills needed in that disruption.
Thank you, Shelley. So APMA, we're in a very lucky position. We represent over 300 members right across Canada and growing, and over 90% of the independent part supplier industry. One of the best parts of my job, at least, is that we get to listen to our members about what is happening on the ground, and let's have some real solutions to their problems, especially around workforce development. So a lot of the work that we do focuses specifically on that. It's not just about the auto parts manufacturers in Canada, it's all levels of the auto sector. So no matter what part you work on or you touch, we are there to address it head on. So a few of the programs, I will obviously do a pitch for the programs that we do, have really been a game changer, I will say, in getting on-the-ground solutions. I had the chance to sit at a round table with sectors that included hospitality, included like the forestry industry, and a few others, and everyone had the same problem. We don't have enough people, and we can't keep people. And so what do? There were a lot of complaints and very few solutions at that table. APMA, we have been really starting from the ground up to say, how can we have real solutions that will go directly into the workforce and keep them in automotive? It's highly competitive out there. You lose someone, especially if you're looking at entry level or general labor, they're leaving for 25 cents an hour more somewhere else. So how do we start having careers in automotive that, yes, at both the entry level and set them on career paths and make sure that they're staying in the sector and that they're invested? At APMA, we established the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Fund. This has been one of our most oversubscribed programs in partnership with the province. And our members said, we don't have new pools of talent. We're working with the universities, we're working with the colleges, but there's a huge gap for us across the board, and we can't meet our production quotas if we don't have people there every day on the production line. And so what that does is our program, it's really a 3-month placement, and it's an opportunity for each individual to become the perfect candidate for that job. And so over the course of 3 months, $8,000 is available, wage subsidies, training, mentorship, mental health. We look at the whole person. Because if you're asking someone to show up for a shift or show up for a salaried position, you're asking for a huge chunk of their lives. And part of that should be, what are you going to do to invest in them? This is a person, a human being. We have to look at the whole picture. And so to date, we've had 100% hiring rate success. Every candidate who has gone through the program has become that ideal candidate, and I think 25 companies are what we're at right now. Everyone has hired those candidates, and we've worked really closely with them. On the other side, when we look at kind of upskilling the current workforce, there's no question the change to electric vehicles. There's big changes coming, but I don't think that's a daunting thing. And I think that's something that the auto industry is used to. We continue to innovate, we continue to change. There is not something changing at any given moment. Everyone was afraid of technology and robots and all of these things, and it's going to replace all these jobs. We are still sitting here today trying to fill those jobs. And so I think the opportunity here is, how do we upskill the current workforce? How do we see what they need? How do we talk to our members and understand their customer needs? And so we also launched a program called Driven. We were ahead of the curve before COVID. Now we're online like everybody else. But a really unique position where we work between industry, we work with colleges and universities, and we are able to push out online micro-credentials at a much faster pace. We can pivot to immediate needs, we can pivot to certain customers' needs, for example, and get that training into the hands of anyone carrying a smartphone, a tablet, etc. that is not a one-stop solution, but it's one piece of the puzzle. And I think, if we're talking about grandma's quilts, here's another piece of that quilt. And that's what's really important to us, is that we don't want to see people leave, and we need to do a better job as well. The current workforce, there needs to be upskilling, no question. A vehicle is a vehicle. Flavio and I had this conversation the other day. If you're driving down the street, unless you're my 8-year-old who can identify every car, but if you're driving down the street, you can't tell the difference between if you're looking at an electric vehicle or a gas-powered one. What is the difference? Vehicles are vehicles. They're going to be continuing on our streets. And so when we look at the people who are working every day in these jobs, they're still going to be manufacturing parts. They're still going to be building cars. And so, yes, some of those parts will change. The materials might change. But at the end of the day, this industry has been so resilient. I really do see it as an opportunity to make sure that our workforce stays. And then I think an opportunity too, and this is to everyone in the room and on the stage, to do better marketing. Kids, if you look at K-12, they know how to become a teacher or a doctor or a police officer. But if you ask them, what does a career in auto look like? They have absolutely no idea. Or they think they're on a production line that maybe a different generation had done before them. They don't see the same things that we see as the potential. And so, yes, marketing, yes, communication to kids in that space. And Project Arrow, which APMA unveiled at CES last month, here's a perfect example of the potential of Canadian tech and Canadian talent, that we can build an entire vehicle and demonstrate the potential and what the future holds for those kids, and they get to see a really cool car. So I think, this really is across all. We're looking at different programs, and we're even starting to look at how we get into high schools, which is still probably too late, or even middle schools. But to genuinely have these conversations, that if you're going to build a talent pipeline, to do it right and to do it well and to do it with some longevity.
Wow, that's incredible. And what I love about what your conversation is about that resilience piece and how the automotive sector is resilient. And we've seen it time and time again. And I think sometimes that gets lost in the conversation. And I think as Canadians, we should be proud of what we've done and how we continue to step up. And now tying on to, the whole training of that next generation piece, I think this is an interesting one, and one I know many of us in this room have this conversation, is how do we inspire the youth to even understand what it looks like? What does it feel like? Because it's not what they think. So I'm curious if anyone along this panel has any ideas of how do we speak to the youth of the future?
I can start. So at McMaster, we have no problem of attracting young talent to what we do, because the overwhelming feedback I get from them, they care about sustainability and planet. And they understand the transportation system we have is just not sustainable. So a ton of young people, they want to focus on next generation of vehicles because of sustainability aspects and also the coolness aspects of it. Because when you combine AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, software, electrification, and cars and performance of vehicles, not just fuel economy, that attracts people. And so we don't have any problem in getting interested individuals to the programs. One thing I would say, we need more universities, we need more government support to have critical mass in a bigger way. So in an earlier panel, it was mentioned that Canadian ways distribute the funding, go to different places. Think about a city with 2,000-3,000 buildings, each of them is 1-story, 2-story, 3-story buildings. Are you going to go to that city to see the city? Not a lot of people. But if you have a city and a downtown, and that downtown has 20, 30, 50 high-rises, big, beautiful high-rises that go to 100-story tall, and they are different. People go to that downtown. That attracts people. And also a lot of 1-story, 2-story, 3-story buildings around it, they are going to get more business. This is one area that we are not doing that well in Canada. So if you look at professors, typically they have for graduate students. Okay, can you compete at a global scale if your research team is a team of 4? Maybe if you are in a very niche area. If you want to win for Canada, you need to have high rises. You need to have companies, entities, university groups that everyone around the world, they say, oh, electrification, this or that, I want to go there. So what I'm advocating is we need not to worry about picking winners or supporting entities, organizations, universities that who are willing to go to the distance and do more, because that's the thing attracting the young people. You know, a lot of high school kids, they want to go to Tesla because it's cool. They, you know, when you talk to them, I say, okay, what do you want to do in 10 years? Oh, I want to work for Tesla. Why? It's just the coolness aspects and sustainability. We need to implement those things in our strategies and go for critical mass. Government, you know, in Ontario, if you want to support 2 students, train 2, okay, there are funding from Ontario Centers of Innovations, OVIN, and the rest. You want to do 5? Okay, you can do that. You need to hire a staff to half of her or his time to deal with administration, but good luck if you want to do 50. And car companies, they need more. We need the government to support critical mass for training.
Well, thank you. And there's a lot to unpack there, and I'd like to dive into some questions, but I'm actually going to pass over to a really cool initiative. So Guido, your Flex and Gates' new Flex-on-Ion Battery Innovation Center is a really good example of an industry-led project addressing that skills gap. So I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about what you're doing and your goals.
Sure, thanks, Shelley. So I'm with Flex and Gate. Flex and Gate is a auto parts supplier, for those who don't know. We are in the metals business, the plastics business, automotive lighting, mechanical assemblies, and our owner, Shahid Khan, decided one day that we need to get into this electrification, and here all of our products had nothing to do with powertrain, and so this is the first, you know, sort of dip into powertrain type components. So what we did is we started a division called Flex Ion, which is a battery research center. It's our innovation center. And what we did is a little bit different than the norm. So if you go around to where a battery research is done, chemistry research, what you will find is typically a lab, you know, that produces small coin and small pouch cells to understand, you know, the performance around various chemistries. What we've done is we took that lab and we took the next step, and we actually can build batteries at rate. So not only are we developing, or our mission is not only to develop the chemistries, but also to develop the process and to demonstrate that, you know, a repeatable process. So our facility is about a 14 megawatt facility, depending on chemistry and depending on format that you're looking for. You know, it's a 14 megawatt facility that can run at rate, located in Windsor, Ontario. The Flex Ion facility really had 3 goals when we got started. The first one is obviously research and development, and that research and development was chemistries, you know, next generation batteries. We're working on that. The other part of it is process development, optimizing processes to you know, ensure that you're getting you know, the best cost, so to speak. And then the third, and probably very important, one of our missions was North American energy independence. That's what we run around keep saying, and it's about supply chain. So we invite suppliers, North American suppliers, to partake in Flex Ion and, you know, bring what technology might have. We work together. We have agreements in place, and we can develop together. So that's really our mission. Those 3 things are really covering the R&D section of it. Then the other side of it is building bench strength. So by having partnerships with the universities and the colleges, and, you know, Currently, we have a partnership with the University of Windsor, who's in the room, St. Clair College, another local college, and who's also in the room, Ontario Tech University, and we have these projects going, as well as co-op students, in order to build bench strength for the eventual gigafactory. So that's really our goal. It's quite an adventure, and it's very interesting, very different to our normal production.
Excellent, and it's exciting to see how it all pieces together. Again, Grandma's quilt is piecing together really well right now.
Yes.
One of the things we've talked a lot about today is that competitive nature and that sense of urgency. And I wanted to touch on the competitive nature of talent. And Ali, as representing McMaster, to what extent is addressing the talent gap about competing with other jurisdictions right now?
It's an awesome time to graduate from university. So we have companies that say, do you have a pulse? Okay, if you have a pulse, have you been at McMaster Automotive Resource Center a week? You are hired. And it's literally like that. And the competition comes from multiple angles. One is, jurisdictions. South of the border, Michigan, they cannot get enough of graduates, Canadian graduates, and especially if you are Canadian, easily you can go to US. Other countries, not so easy. California, I have students, a year before graduation, they get salary offers twice, literally twice of what they get in Canada, in Ontario. And then it's not just Michigan, Midwest, and California, is also now Texas. And then, they do calculations. Okay, I don't pay a state income tax there, and, the housing is cheap and all that. So that's one area of competition. Another area, different industries. So if you are an electric motor expert, you can go so many different companies. Aerospace, robotics, and if you do AI, software AI, it's not just automotive. You can go to, Google's, Apple's, Intel's of the world, right? So the competition is so tough. Now, how do you address that? Again, I go back to critical mass. If you have critical mass, for example, at Mac, GM sponsors our EcoCar team, and US Department of Energy pays for it. So interestingly, the funding comes from US DOE, Oregon National Lab, and GM, not Canadian government. And we have 180 students. Why GM is doing that? Because they want to hire them. And they give them offers way before they graduate. We have massive industry-sponsored projects with OEMs and suppliers, and we have 50 people on those projects, and then they get hired by those companies. Those students, the generation of them, what is impressive and amazing, they don't do the calculation just funding and salary. They say, okay, I have a relationship with this OEM. I feel at home. We are making a difference. I want to stay there, right? And stay in Ontario. So now, if you are a big entity, maybe you can afford it. But if you are a small business or SME, maybe you cannot. So that's where the government should come in and support more to help those smaller entities to be able to collaborate with academia. And you would find a lot of interested professors who are willing to work with companies. The time that, okay, I'm a professor and I do research for the sake of research to publish is gone. We don't do that. We do things that go into cars, and actually you can get more citations because of that. So you find really good partners in academia to work with you. But if the government supports bigger collaborations, that's where you can train more effectively. That's where you can have higher number of people that would go to industry. And a lot of, by the way, OEMs are hiring in Ontario because, healthcare system, they pay less. I said in California, they pay twice. So if they can hire you in Ontario versus Michigan, they want to hire you here. and we have people who want to stay here. So the opportunities are massive, but we need to be more strategic.
That's interesting, and especially the fact that California is offering double. Again, it just speaks to how competitive this market really is. And I'm interested, Guido, from your perspective, there's a lot of recent announcements across Ontario, across Quebec, but especially in the Windsor area. You know, to what extent is it not just competition with U.S. and other countries, but competition just in and amongst ourselves?
Yeah, this is a very, very big problem. It certainly keeps me up at night. You know, the quick answer is that this is a problem. There's no doubt. We need more people in the pipeline. We need them quickly. We can't wait 2 years. It has to happen now. There's more jobs out there than there are people. It's simple as that. And being in the Windsor area, but you know, it's not just Windsor, it's all of southwestern Ontario. Anyone who has the credentials to have these jobs, generally speaking, are able, as Ali said, to get a TN visa. They can work in the U.S. So we're not just competing down the street. You know, our big thing is the announcement of the Stellantis LG facility. You know, that's going to be a bit of a drain for our research center for sure. You know, there's another announcement potentially coming down the road, but there's many more in Michigan. I mean, this is just going on, and it's not going to stop. I think the answer is more people in the pipeline and quickly. We are amazed at how, you know, I don't know how to describe it, but academia is doing a great job at training people. There's no doubt. You know, locally, St. Clair College, the University of Windsor is cranking out, you know, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, and they're all top notch. And when we hire those people, not just from University of Windsor, but other, you know, locations, when we hire those people and put them in our metals or plastics or lighting commodities, it's pretty natural for us. In the battery sector, it's all new. It's a very different manufacturing thought, very different discipline, and that takes a certain level of experience. You'll probably pick up a lot of the lab in academics, but the real level of employment is those with experience, knowledge, and some background. That's why I believe that FlexIon is probably a good model for something like that. I think we're going to need a little more government academic support, and by that I mean money probably, to try to crank as many people through this as possible. And hopefully it could become a model for others to do the same thing. You know, again, developing batteries in a lab is one level, but developing batteries at rate, and I'm speaking of batteries, but there's much, much more than batteries that goes on in these facilities, the cooling, the thermal runaway suppression, all these other things, that's all part of the bigger picture. So, you know, a lot of that is, you know, we deal with it on a day-to-day basis, getting great experience, just not nearly enough of them.
Can I jump in for a sec?
I'd actually ask you.
Well, I was going to say, number one, I don't know if you're one of our members, but we should talk after. I might have a few programs for you. And then on the other side, I'm going to be sunshine and rainbows today. Part of the benefit, I think, too, is that when we've talked to, so obviously in Canada, we are a little bit borderless with especially the US and Mexico when we look at our companies and how many times parts move across the borders, for example. And we've seen it, you know, a big issue in trade negotiations. But I think what's important to remember is that, especially here in Ontario, we've had American companies come here to set up shop, and they are very surprised by the amount of government support that is available here in Ontario and across Canada. Something that in a previous life, I worked in politics, I thought this was what happened in most jurisdictions, and it's not. And so it was interesting that they were setting up their companies across the US. They were doing it independently. They were responsible for solving a lot of their problems. Where here in Canada, very surprised about a lot of the partnerships that happen across different levels of government, municipal, federal, or provincial. And I think that's a good example of the things that we do at APMA with our programs, but that we continue to have those conversations. There are a very wide range of funding opportunities, and APMA happy to help anyone navigate those, because it can be difficult. But there is so much opportunity here and those partnerships. And a lot of the time, it's being able to have the voice to turn around and do that. Government is difficult to navigate, no question. Most people see it as bureaucratic, red tape, and it's in the way. There's also a lot of opportunities, and especially federally right now, they are putting out millions and millions of dollars around talent and skills development. And so I think what's important to remember too is we get that perspective at APMA, a bit more of the 30,000 feet up, because we get to see what all of our members are doing and their problems. But then we also get to turn around and have those conversations with what does a public-private partnership look like? What do funding opportunities look like? And that's the same with all of the colleges and universities. Micro-credentials, for example, are a bit of the Wild West. The curriculum in them is not regulated the same way that it is in colleges and universities with their diplomas and their degrees. So they are able, right now, colleges and universities, to pivot much faster than they could have in the past. And we work so closely with them on that. So again, rainbows and sunshine over here, but the opportunities are there. And I think that if there's companies out there who are having a specific issue, it's worth having that conversation, because we get to at least look at the landscape and help navigate in that space.
Oh, Shelley, may I just jump in for 1 second? Lauren, thank you so much. We will be talking. I do need to give a shout out to NGen, however. Flex Ion did get support from NGen. You saw it on the board before, and that partnership's worked extremely well. So John Laughlin and team, thank you. So I didn't want to get by without saying that.
Absolutely. And it's an interesting point, because even in the role of economic development, that's something we so often hear is, there's government funding programs, so how do you navigate them? And what's out there, and how can you tap into them? And it's not easy, because there's no two programs alike. And there's that administrative side of things. So certainly, the work of people across the provinces and APMA, that's a huge benefit to the companies. And I'm interested, Simon, from Quebec.
Well, I agree with all that's being said, and I won't repeat the same thing, but I think Lauren mentioned something very important. I mean, I don't think there's a money issue at government level here. It's just that I feel what I see in Quebec is they need some clear input from the industry about what programs have to be developed and what sorts of need there is at an industry level. And this is really we've been struggling with a diverse industry as it is here in Quebec. I can speak for Ontario, but really when we talk about electric, smart transportation, battery sector, it's quite different in terms of skill set, and we need to dig in deeper and get a clear picture for government bodies and authorities so they can fund the programs and the training that's needed at an industry level, and that can be mutualized. And this is, I'm sure, the key. And also, I think Ali had a good point. I don't think it's difficult to create interest about this industry. There's a cool factor to it. You can definitely have an impact on climate change, global warming. So students are quite interested by this. But I think what makes the difference is that they can work on very concrete projects. And this is very, very important, especially for software people. We need to attract a bunch of software people with lots of skills in that field. And honestly, in the province of Quebec, it's not natural to go into the transport sector, although there's a huge talent gap there. And you were mentioning what kind of initiative or ideas we can put forward to attract this kind of talent. And software developers, they're not looking for jobs. People are looking for them in several industries, and there are industries where they get a lot more money than what our companies can provide. But at the end of the day, working on concrete projects like hacking, like buses, charging infrastructure, autonomous trains, that excites a lot of people, I think. So at an industry level, we're looking at, bringing this kind of initiatives forward so we can show what types of issues have to be tackled, for our companies, and this is the best hiring platforms for our companies.
Great, and that's a really good segue into, I love the fact that there is a demand, and there's clearly a demand. The amount of people in this room, I've heard the amount of people on the waiting list, this industry is fascinating, it's exciting, it's new, it's certainly engaging. But from a talent perspective, I'm also wondering how much of a talent gap problem is it now versus, let's say, 3, 5, 8 years? Are we prepared for the future? And it's a big question, but I'm going to start with Ali, because you're right beside me.
It's a huge gap, not just now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So the immediate need right now is for a lot of companies, OEMs and suppliers, they need people to design things. They need more expertise. Like, I have graduates that they don't get a job because they have just master's degree, not PhD. But the companies need a ton of talent. And if I graduate 1,000 PhDs today, they have jobs a month ago. That's how hot this industry is now for talent. So they need people who could design things. They are highly technical, whether it's a battery pack, electric motor, power electronics, ADAS system, software and control, and AI. This will change 3 years from now, 5 years from now. In Canada, there would be more manufacturing jobs that it's less design, but it's more manufacturing and implementation. But I would argue a lot of those jobs, they need a lot of skills. Because if you are making an electric motor, you need a ton of automation. If you need power electronics, you need a ton of automation. If you are doing software and controls, you need what? Functional safety. You need AutoSAR. You need a lot of really high skills. So we have the need now, and we have the need longer term. Now, if you are a company, it's good to work with a university. Find a professor, a research group, a university, work with them. If your goal is 4, 5, 10 people, there are great opportunities to leverage the funding. If you do it right, $1 from you becomes $4, $5, sometimes a lot more. And it's a lot more cost effective than going to US or do it yourself. So for a smaller project, there are a ton of opportunities, both federal and provincial. And also, you can work with universities to do actually work for you. So we have no problem of getting talent. I get applications like 10, 15 a day from around the world, and you can bring them here. And we do a ton of actual work, motors that go into cars or eVTOL aerospace applications or power electronics and so on. So you can work with universities to address your needs, immediate needs, and have a pipeline that you hire. The problem that we face is, okay, what if I need 100? So I have, industry partners that they are giving us cash like $2 million, $3 million a year. There is no way I can leverage this with both federal and Ontario. Maximum at federal is a $1 million cap from NSERC Alliance, right? And good luck leveraging that in Ontario. You need to hire 2, 3 people to just deal with paperwork. So we do not have opportunities for critical mass because, Stellantis of the world, GM, Ford, and others, they need higher numbers, right? They need to hire hundreds, thousands, and we need to address that. Right now, leveraging it with government is impossible unless you divide it to so many small proposals, which is doesn't make sense.
And a follow-up question, are we enrolling students fast enough and in the numbers that we need to match these projections?
We are not. We need to get a lot more students because the needs is huge. So one way companies are trying to address, if you look at OEMs, they have some of the North American OEMs, they have thousands of engineers. They do engines, transmission. The cars of the future, they don't need those, right? So they want to train them to do other stuff. So one thing we are doing at Mac is we have Mark Ed. Mark stands for McMaster Automotive Resource Center, Ed for education. We do short courses for people who are in industry. They don't care about credits, micro-credentials, or credentials at all. They just want to learn. And we are charging them $2,000 US per person, per short course. Each short course is 8 3-hour modules. And if I can offer, 10 short courses now, and each of them 1,000 seats, there are people who want to take that. But the thing is, we are overwhelmed with the amount of need and interest that is out there. So we need to bring more people within academia and government to do more of these things, to train the people who are already in industry and also train the next generation.
Absolutely. And I'm going to pass this over to Lauren. So from an industry membership standpoint, what are you seeing for the future talent? And how are we meeting it?
I think part of the approach to looking at talent is, maybe this won't be, someone won't be a fan of what I'm about to say, but getting rid of some of the traditional pathways to education in order to land jobs. Because I think what often happens is we see it as two separate things. We see it as looking at general labor jobs that look at production, and we look at other, say, salaried jobs that look at things like engineers, et cetera. These are obviously two very different pathways that happen in terms of education and training. When we talk to members, it really is, I will take someone tomorrow and I will train them on the job. I will do the work integrated learning. I will handle this. But we're only doing that company by company. And so it needs to be a much broader approach in how we do that. I think that, obviously engineering is one very specific pathway and requires the right education pathway. But when we look at other things, like why can't we have someone come in at an entry-level position or look at general labor? What does a career look like to them? Can we put career pathways? I know I saw Rad here and Oven looking at career navigators and pathways of what can my future look like. So when you come in at a certain point, you can start to see the interest that happens across different jobs, and is there an opportunity within that space to do that training? Obviously, again, APMA driven, we are looking at that, how to supplement some of the in-person to do it online, to take some of the pressure off small and medium-sized businesses who don't have the same resources that maybe some of the tier ones do in the bigger companies. Really that holistic approach to the industry overall. And then I would also say really looking at new pools of talent, because historically it's been largely white males who have participated in the workforce in automotive, and I think that is still the image for a lot of people today. And when we start to look at racialized communities participating, women, youth, people with disabilities, Indigenous women are 0.6% of the workforce in automotive. That doesn't even register as a single percent. And so people historically, when we talked about disabilities, for example, in one of our rounds of the EDI fund, people did not understand that it could be a visible or an invisible disability, that it doesn't have to be something that you can see, it can be something that is invisible. And what do supports look like? There's an education piece on the company side as well. It is a lazy excuse to turn around to say, I don't know how to have those conversations or hire those people. It takes education on behalf of the company to be able to say, yes, I can talk to someone to say, we want to start hiring more Black employees, and what does an inclusive workspace look like for that? When we first launched our EDI fund, many companies did not want to have the conversation with us, and they said, we're not interested. We're like, we're backed by government. These forms are government forms. These are not, things that will violate any rights. That education piece to get people into a comfortable space to have these conversations, that was the first step. We offered training for employers to get them to that space, and now we have a record amount of people knocking on the door, still trying to get spots for those funds as we did the education. So it was on our end as well to reach out and do that training and get them into a comfortable space. But I think on the flip side, if you're really going to have an inclusive space where women aren't just at a mid-level, but they start to really hit the senior ranks of some of these companies across automotive, we've really got to create that space, because it's going to take a generation to get them there if we have them coming in the front door tomorrow, for example.
Then Guido or Simon, do you have anything to add to the future talent?
Well, from my perspective, the original question was, what do you think about 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now? like Ali and everyone's saying, the problem has been here. It's here today. I feel like it's going to be here tomorrow. We're talking about batteries and EVs and all of the technologies that go around that, but this problem exists. From my perspective, we hire generally we hire mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, software engineering in our company, and ever since remote work started, the world is an open place, and so many of our people, we're challenged with trying to keep up with salaries and work conditions, ideally remote work, in order to maintain our current employees. But basically, the costs have gone way up. You can't find anybody, and it continues to happen. And EV just adds another layer to that. So I don't believe this is going to change anytime soon. We just need to get better at it, get more people in the pipeline, and try to resolve it over time.
Brilliant. And with minimal time left, what I'm curious about is beyond what we've already discussed, what is the one thing or the most important thing you would like to see happen next?
I can go first. So on a positive note, so in Ontario, we are generating twice per capita more engineers than California. This is awesome. Now, we have tremendous opportunities here for North America and Canada and Ontario, but we need to think broader than just batteries. Let's think about electric motors and power electronics. We do not need to go and compete with IRA or the CHIPS Act. Instead of competition, we can complement. Think about electric motors. Right now, about 40% of the cost of an electric propulsion motor is for permanent magnets, rare earth metals, coming 84% from China, okay? Thanks to government funding, actually, the reason I came to Canada about 11, 12 years ago, we developed technologies. We take rare earth metals completely out of the electric motor equation. We have a university spin-off company, Enedime Inc. Enedime stands for Energy Paradigm, and our goal is long-term to do a gigafactory for a motor. People don't talk about that. So you can have a supply chain that is completely North American, Canadian. It needs electrical steel. Hamilton is a steel town, for God's sakes. It's, electrical steel, copper, mechanical components, and a ton of software. We are good in those things. So another area is power electronics. Let the US to do semiconductors. Let them do chips. We do everything else. The chip is this size. You need thermal management, mechanical packaging, bus bars, cooling, everything else, and a ton of software. We should focus on that. We need to think about gigafactories for electronics, using the chips south of the border, do them here. If we do that, it's great for Canada, it's great for US, it's great for North America and the world, and we have that opportunity.
Excellent. So I'll pass over to Simon. What's the one thing we need the most?
Well, if I talk for Quebec, there's been a lot of talk about the battery sector, value chain, and so on. But honestly, that's a huge undertaking. Because it's we've heard a lot of announcement, but keep in mind, this is happening in more remote areas. We talked about Bécancour, it's not Toronto, neither Montreal. It's a small town, that will need massive migration and massive upskilling of people and bringing people from abroad as well. So I hope we're going to be successful in this, but that's going to be a massive undertaking. But at the same time, it's critical, so I'm positive it's going to happen. But honestly, that is huge on top of everything else that we need to build in the industry, like electric cars, buses, and smart mobility infrastructure, and so on. It's oof. It's crazy.
My one word would be collaboration. Looking at, talking to each individual company or member, whether, whatever parts or tech, or even if they're, on the outside looking in, more collaboration and communication across the sector. So whether it's looking at geography, coast to coast, or Windsor all the way up to mining in the north, that conversation, it's always the same conversation with many members. Everyone's like, we're special, our problem is different. And we're like, no, you're the 7th person this week who we've talked to, and very similar. And I think because so often we're head down looking at meeting quotas and bracing for the future and what will it look like when I can't build an exhaust pipe, but I need to now be moving into what we can manufacture for electric vehicles. These conversations are happening not just at your companies, but it's happening across the entire supply chain, and as the supply chain shifts. And so I would strongly recommend on the collaboration side, just always having those conversations and being open about it. And whether it's an association like APMA or whether it's, events like today, it's worth having that to be able to tap in, because it should be an industry-wide solution, because we are competing against other jurisdictions. We are competing every day with countries on the other side of the world, and how are we going to keep that supply chain here? How are we going to look at those opportunities and carve out that space for what comes down the pipeline? If we're talking to each other, we are globally competitive. If we're doing it individually, we're fighting each other. And so I think with that in mind, it really is about the opportunity to talk about the problems and be open about them, so that we can have really meaningful solutions that are going to put more people into jobs and be better producers and manufacturers, and really demonstrate to the world that the heavyweight that we are here in Canada is the backbone of a lot of the industry that takes place.
My turn. The one thing, oh my God, I don't know how this plays, but put an end to supply shortage. Holy smokes, is this industry tough enough without that? So, tough enough without that. So, but no, seriously, I feel as though there's a lot of confusion, not related to supply shortage, although that is my one dream and wish. But I feel as though there's one thing that's very, very confusing out there. So all of our customers, I'll just use an example, Ford Motor Company, the F-150 truck, they produce 750,000 of those a year in 2 plants, has another plant for a Lightning truck. They're expanding capacity and building a new plant in Memphis, Tennessee for the new electric truck, all of which is going to be incremental. Everybody knows that's not real. It puts a huge financial strain on companies like Flexengate, Magna, Linamar, all of us. It puts a huge financial strain because you have to be contractually obligated to be ready for all of that. And I believe that everyone is banking, or no one is certain of the future infrastructure. Do we have enough infrastructure to charge all these vehicles? Are they going to be premium, or is an electric vehicle going to become the econo scooter car? All of these questions are out there, and nobody's willing to give up. Especially in trucks and SUVs, I think that was talked about earlier today. No one's willing to give up the capacity on the ICE and the internal combustion engine side, and it's really causing companies like ours to be very confused as to what the future is. I mean, you look out there, 2025 is going to be this incredible year where everything's electric. We all know better than that, but where do you put your money? Where do you put your capital? So I believe that infrastructure would be one of the answers to that, which would help people see some clarity. No one's willing to say anything, and to verify or guarantee that there's going to be enough charging capacity for all these electric cars. Anyway, that's it. And supply.
It's a very complicated quilt, but lots of expertise and ideas behind how to stitch it together, and really stitched with that sense of collaboration. I have 35 seconds for a question.
Guido, hey, this thing works good. Guido, this one's for you, I think, and it was just based on Brian Leeper from Dubois, by the way. On the labour shortage you mentioned down in the Windsor area, typically, is it labour as in general labour, or are you looking at the higher-end tech section, which Ali talked about earlier, that there seems to be plenty of, but are you getting both, and what one is the one that you don't have enough of?
So in our specific, well, first off, I'm the Vice President of Engineering, so when I'm speaking to technical labor, engineers, technicians, technologists. However, to answer your question, I believe all of our Ontario plants, we don't have an issue with general labor in general, no pun intended. We have a much, much bigger issue with general labor in our Michigan plants and in our Texas plants. So that's kind of the regions where we're seeing a huge problems, primarily Michigan, actually, downtown Detroit, to be very specific. So we're addressing those through, I think you mentioned some immigration, getting other ethnic groups that are not generally in Detroit, busing them in and trying to use some of our tactics in other regions of the world, and it's working. It seems to be working. So that's on the general labor side. But my comments were more on the technical side.
Hi there. I was just wondering, earlier today we heard about how the industry is going to disrupt 3 million jobs over, I can't remember what the timeline is, the next 5 years. For the people that are already in the industry but maybe need to be reskilled, like I'm hearing about, it sounds like new students or like younger generation, I'm hearing about like lots of channels for that. But, you know, Lauren, you sort of touched upon it to some degree, but really, are we clear on what the demographics are and how many of those 3 million are we going to actually lose because we can't upskill them or retrain them? Because they're generational gaps or, you know, whatever the issue may be.
I don't have a direct answer to that, but I will say on our end of things, of course there'll be huge disruption, and that's a conversation whether it's from the top at the OEMs or looking across our manufacturers. We are doing one small part, like looking at a totally new model to do something online, especially for production line workers that hasn't been done before. I think there has to be a multi-prong approach. Big companies definitely have resources when we look at the OEMs, for example, to be able to put huge HR teams and get training happening across the sector, especially if you're going to shut down an entire facility, you know, as you're shifting over to EVs and training those people. I do think, of course, we're going to lose some people along the way. There is no question about that, and I think as these shifts happen, that is part of it. This is a very simple, I mean, isn't a basic answer, but the conversations that we have with people really are, what are their biggest fears? And people are afraid of the change that is coming because this conversation of change feels so daunting. But when we're on the ground and saying, how can we support you? It really is broken down as we look at each section of a facility, for example. And so I think we will lose people. I think there's an opportunity that if we frame it in a different way to talk about, here's the opportunities, here's where job A may turn into job B, but how we support you along the way. This has kind of always been, whether it's moving Industry 4.0 onward, I think this has always happened, and we'll see mass retirements continue to happen, but also getting that new generation. But how do we find that one sandwiched in between? So I think the question is one that is not yet answered, and that pressure is building, because even speaking to different people in government, one is saying, we're ready for this. We're putting out all these investments into the electric future, but then we have on the other side of government saying, but what about the people? And it's still happening in siloed conversation. So I'll pitch a collaboration again, but I don't think there's definitely not one solution. There's going to be multiple solutions, but I think it's happening now, and the pressure is going to continue building.